I found the receipt in his jacket pocket. Dinner for 2 at the restaurant where we got engaged. But I was home that night. Alone. With our kids. I didn't cry immediately. I stood in our closet, holding that piece of paper. My hands were shaking. My heart was breaking. But my mind was already planning. I hired a private investigator. I opened a separate bank account. I started documenting everything. Every late night. Every business trip. Every lie. I was preparing to lose everything. Our home. Our life. My dignity. Then someone knocked on my door. A man I'd never met. Tall, exhausted, holding a folder. He said 4 words that changed everything. Your husband, my wife. He had proof I didn't have. Evidence I couldn't get. And a plan I never imagined. We weren't victims anymore. We were partners. In the most devastating revenge either of them would ever face. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I smiled at my husband every morning, kissed him goodbye, and destroyed his entire world in silence. This is what happened when patience became power. My name is Rebecca, and for 15 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage. I know how that sounds. Every woman who's been betrayed probably thought the same thing, but I genuinely believed David and I were different. We met in college, fell in love over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza, got married right after graduation, and built a life together that looked perfect from the outside. And maybe that was the problem. It looked perfect. David worked in corporate finance, climbing the ladder steadily, making good money. I had been a marketing director before we had kids, then transitioned to consulting from home so I could be there for Emma and Jake. Our daughter was 13, our son was 10, and they were everything to me. We lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, took family vacations every summer, hosted barbecues with the neighbors. From the outside, we were the couple everyone envied. But I started noticing things, changing about 8 months ago. Small things at first. David started going to the gym more often. He bought new clothes, expensive ones, tailored shirts, designer jeans. He was on his phone constantly, smiling at the screen in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. When I'd ask who he was texting, he'd say it was work colleagues or his fantasy football league. I believed him, or maybe I chose to believe him because the alternative was too terrifying. The late nights started around the same time. Big project at work, he'd say, kissing my forehead as he grabbed his keys at 7 p.m., not returning until after midnight. He'd come home smelling like cologne I didn't recognize, claiming he'd grabbed drinks with clients. I pushed down my suspicions. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, crazy. This was David. My David. The man who'd held my hand during 2 difficult births, who'd cried when his father died, who'd built our kids' treehouse with his own hands. He wouldn't cheat on me. Except he was. I found out on a Tuesday. The most ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday you could imagine. I was doing laundry, his laundry, ironically, and I found a receipt folded in the pocket of his sport coat. You know how they say your blood runs cold? That's exactly what happened. I felt ice spread through my veins as I unfolded that thin piece of paper. Lucia's, the Italian restaurant downtown where David proposed to me 16 years ago. Dinner for 2, champagne, the chef's tasting menu, $347. The date on the receipt was from 3 weeks ago, a Thursday night when David told me he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. A Thursday night when I'd fed the kids mac and cheese and fallen asleep alone watching Netflix. He'd taken someone else to our restaurant. I stood in the laundry room, surrounded by the smell of detergent and the hum of the washing machine, and I couldn't breathe. The receipt crumpled in my fist. My vision blurred. I thought I might vomit or pass out or both. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. I walked upstairs to our home office, closed the door, and opened my laptop with trembling hands. I created a new email address he didn't know about. Then I started searching for private investigators in our area. By the time David came home that night with takeout Thai food and a smile, I'd already hired someone to follow him. Her name was Patricia, and she was worth every penny of her expensive retainer. I didn't confront David. I couldn't, not yet. I needed proof, evidence, documentation. In our state, we had no-fault divorce, but I knew if I was going to protect myself and my kids financially, I needed ammunition. David made 3 times what I made. He had access to accounts I didn't fully understand. If I came at him without preparation, I'd be destroyed. So I played the perfect wife. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye in the mornings. I asked about his day over dinner. I laughed at his jokes. I even initiated sex twice because I knew if I suddenly became cold, he'd get suspicious. Each time I felt like I was dying inside, but I did it anyway. And the whole time, Patricia was following him. The photos started arriving within a week. David's car parked outside a luxury apartment complex in the city. David walking hand in hand with a woman into a hotel. David kissing that same woman in the parking lot of a Whole Foods, his hand on her lower back in a way that was so intimate, so familiar, that I had to close my laptop and sob into a pillow so the kids wouldn't hear. The woman was beautiful. Of course she was. Younger than me, maybe early 30s. Long dark hair, perfect figure, expensive clothes. Patricia identified her quickly. Vanessa Morrison, 34, worked in marketing at a firm that contracted with David's company. Married, 2 young kids. She was married. She had a family, just like I did, and she was destroying it just like David was destroying ours. I looked at those photos for hours, memorizing every detail. The way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the smile on his face, genuine, happy, alive in a way he hadn't been with me in years. That's what hurt the most. Not just that he was cheating, but that he looked so happy doing it. I opened a separate bank account and started moving money slowly, carefully, so David wouldn't notice. I made copies of all our financial documents, bank statements, investment accounts, mortgage papers, credit card bills. I kept them in a folder hidden in my car. I documented every late night, every business trip, every lie. I contacted a divorce attorney named Margaret Chen, who came highly recommended. She looked at my evidence and nodded grimly. "You're doing everything right," she told me, "but you need more. Get bank records showing money spent on her. Get text messages if you can. The more you have, the better your position." I was drowning, going through the motions of normal life while secretly preparing to blow it all up, packing school lunches while my heart shattered, attending Emma's soccer games while imagining how I'd tell my kids their father was a liar, smiling at neighbors while wanting to scream that my entire life was a fraud. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I'd lie awake at night next to David, this man I didn't recognize anymore, and wonder how I'd missed the signs. How long had this been going on? Did he love her? Was he going to leave me for her? The questions consumed me. And then, on a rainy Saturday afternoon, while David was allegedly at the office and the kids were at their friends' houses, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I almost didn't answer. I was in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, my hair in a messy bun, no makeup, looking exactly like the devastated wife I was trying so hard to hide. But something made me open the door. A man stood on my porch. Tall, maybe 6'2", dark hair graying at the temples, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked exhausted, deep circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped, holding a thick manila folder against his chest like a shield. "Rebecca," he asked, and his voice was rough, like he'd been crying or yelling or both. "Yes," I gripped the doorframe, every instinct screaming danger. "My name is Marcus Morrison," he said. "I think we need to talk about your husband and my wife." The world tilted. I stared at him, my mouth open, unable to form words. Marcus Morrison, Vanessa Morrison's husband, the betrayed spouse on the other side of this nightmare. "I know who you are," I finally managed. "How did you find me?" "The same way you probably found out about Vanessa," he said, lifting the folder slightly. Private investigator, credit card statements, hotel receipts, 6 months of evidence that our spouses are having an affair. 6 months. They'd been doing this for 6 months. "Can I come in?" Marcus asked. "Please, I know this is insane. But I think we can help each other." I should have said no. I should have closed the door, called my attorney, handled this properly. But I saw something in his eyes that I recognized. The same devastation, rage, and desperation I saw in my own mirror every morning. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where David and I had eaten breakfast that morning, where he'd kissed my cheek and told me he loved me before heading to the office. I made coffee with shaking hands while Marcus spread the contents of his folder across the table. Photos, so many photos. David and Vanessa at restaurants, at hotels, at her apartment. One photo showed them at a park, sitting on a bench, David's arm around her shoulders while she laughed at something he'd said. They looked like a couple, a real couple, not two people sneaking around. "I found out 3 weeks ago," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "I came home early from a business trip and found texts on her phone. She'd forgotten to delete them. At first, she denied it, said I was reading things wrong, but I kept digging." 3 weeks, I repeated. "I found out about 2 weeks ago." "We're the last to know," he said bitterly. "Everyone else, their coworkers, probably some of our friends, they all knew and said nothing." I took a shaky sip of coffee. "What do you want from me?" Marcus leaned forward, and I saw something shift in his expression. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was something harder, colder. "I want them to pay," he said simply. "Both of them, and I think we can make that happen together." "I'm getting a divorce," I told him. "I've hired an attorney, I have evidence. I'm going to take him for everything I can legally get." "That's not enough." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Vanessa and I have a prenup. She doesn't work full-time anymore. She went part-time after our second kid. If we divorce, she walks away with support, but she doesn't lose anything that really matters. She keeps her reputation, her friends, her social status. She gets to be the victim, the woman whose husband couldn't forgive her mistake." "So what are you suggesting?" Marcus pulled out more papers from his folder. "David's company has a strict ethics policy about relationships between employees and contractors. If their affair became known, he'd face an investigation, possibly termination. At minimum, his reputation would be destroyed." My heart started pounding. "Keep going." "Vanessa's firm has similar policies. Plus, she's been using company resources to facilitate this affair. Hotel bookings charged to corporate accounts, business dinners that were actually dates with your husband. I have proof. If this goes public, she'd lose her job and face potential legal action from her employer." I stared at the documents. Marcus had been thorough. Bank statements showing payments to hotels, credit card records, even screenshots of what looked like internal company emails. "You hacked her accounts?" I asked. "She used our shared computer and was too arrogant to hide her tracks properly," Marcus said. "I'm in IT security. It wasn't hard." "This is," I trailed off, my mind racing. "If we expose them, they both lose their jobs, their reputations, everything." "Yes," Marcus looked at me intently. "But it has to be done right. We can't just email this to their HR departments and hope for the best. We need to be strategic, coordinated. We need them to have no way to spin this, no way to claim it's a misunderstanding or a vendetta from bitter spouses." "What's your plan?" He smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "We gather more evidence. We coordinate our timelines. We document everything, every lie, every dollar they spend on this affair, every policy they violate. And then, when we have everything we need, we don't file for divorce. Not yet." "Then what?" "We throw them an anniversary party." I blinked. "What?" "Your anniversary is coming up in 5 weeks, right? I saw it on David's Facebook." "Yes, but..." "And Vanessa and I have ours in 6 weeks. Here's what I'm thinking. We throw a joint celebration. Tell them we want to renew our vows, celebrate our marriages, invite everyone important, family, friends, colleagues. Make it a big event." "I don't understand." Marcus leaned back, and I saw the full extent of his plan in his eyes. We make them think everything is fine, that we suspect nothing. We let them get comfortable, even cocky. And then, at the party, in front of everyone they know and love and work with, we expose everything. My breath caught. That's cruel, vindictive, over the top. Marcus's voice was hard. Rebecca, they've been lying to us for 6 months. They've been sleeping together, laughing at us, making fools of us while we raised their kids and paid their bills and believed their lies. They deserve to feel the same humiliation, the same devastation, the same complete destruction of their lives that they've caused us. I should have said no. I should have told him this was too much, too vindictive, that we should handle this through lawyers and courts like civilized people. But I looked at those photos spread across my table. David's hand on Vanessa's face, their lips meeting, his smile, that genuine, happy smile that used to be mine. I'm in, I said. Marcus and I met 3 more times over the next week, always when David thought I was at yoga or running errands. We refined the plan, coordinated our evidence, and mapped out every detail. Marcus would convince Vanessa that he wanted to work on their marriage, that he'd been distant and wanted to reconnect. He'd suggest the joint anniversary party as a way to celebrate their love and friendship with David and me. The 4 of us had met once at a company event years ago, so it wasn't completely random. I would do the same with David, playing the devoted wife who wanted to celebrate our love and years together. They'll say yes, Marcus predicted, because they think they've gotten away with it. They think we're fools, and their arrogance will be their downfall. He was right. When I suggested the anniversary party to David that night over dinner, his face lit up. That's a wonderful idea, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I feel like we've been so busy lately, we haven't taken time to appreciate what we have. I wanted to throw my wine in his face. Instead, I smiled and squeezed his hand. I just want to celebrate us, everything we've built together. Me too, he said, and I saw guilt flicker across his face for just a moment before he buried it. Let me check with Marcus and Vanessa. I'm sure they'd love to do something together. Of course he could contact Vanessa immediately. Of course he had that access. That would be perfect, I said sweetly. A real celebration. Over the next 4 weeks, I became an actress. An Oscar-worthy performance of the loving, devoted wife. I helped David shop for a new suit for the party. I smiled when he told me Vanessa thought it was a lovely idea. I planned the event with meticulous care, renting a beautiful venue, hearing caterers, sending invitations to everyone important in our lives. And the entire time, Marcus and I continued to gather evidence. Patricia, my investigator, kept following David and documenting every meeting with Vanessa. Marcus installed monitoring software on their shared home computer and collected even more proof of their affair. We both went through our spouses' financial records, creating comprehensive timelines of every dollar spent on hotels, dinners, and gifts. I found out David had bought Vanessa a Tiffany bracelet for her birthday. $3,000 of our money spent on his mistress's wrist. Marcus found out Vanessa had been taking sick days that she spent in hotel rooms with David. We compiled everything into 2 identical folders, one for each of them. Evidence of their affair, copies of their company's ethics policies with relevant sections highlighted, and financial records showing every policy violation. We also prepared 2 presentations. Marcus, with his IT background, created a video montage set to music, photos of David and Vanessa together, screenshots of text messages. He'd recovered dozens from her phone backups, hotel receipts, and a timeline showing the 6-month affair. It was devastating, undeniable, damning. We planned to play it at the party, in front of everyone. Are you sure you want to do this? Marcus asked me the week before the event. We were meeting at a coffee shop halfway between our houses, going over final details. Once we do this, there's no going back. It will be brutal, public, ugly. I thought about the last 4 weeks. David kissing me goodbye every morning, lying to my face every single day. coming home smelling like her perfume and climbing into bed next to me. The way he'd held me 2 nights ago and told me he was the luckiest man in the world. "I'm sure," I said. "They deserve this." "Yes," Marcus agreed, his eyes hard. "They do." The night of the party arrived. I wore a red dress, David's favorite color on me. I did my hair and makeup perfectly. I looked beautiful, and I wanted David to see exactly what he was losing. The venue was stunning, an elegant restaurant with a private room overlooking the city. White tablecloths, candles, soft lighting. I'd spared no expense. David had questioned the cost, but I'd told him it was a special occasion and he'd agreed, signing the check without realizing he was funding his own destruction. 60 people attended, both sets of parents, our siblings, close friends, David's colleagues and bosses, Vanessa's coworkers and clients. The kids were at their grandparents' house. I wasn't going to let them witness this. David and Vanessa arrived separately, of course. They played their parts perfectly, friendly but not too familiar, smiling at each other in passing but not lingering. They thought they were so clever. Marcus and I knew better. "You look beautiful," David whispered in my ear as we greeted guests. "Have I told you lately how much I love you?" "You tell me every day," I said, smiling up at him. It wasn't a lie. He did tell me every day, every single life-filled day. Vanessa and Marcus arrived, and she looked stunning in a blue dress that probably cost a fortune. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and told me how happy she was to celebrate our marriages. "To lasting love," she said, raising her champagne glass. "To getting what you deserve," I replied, smiling sweetly. She didn't catch the double meaning. We ate dinner. People made toasts. David's father talked about marriage being a partnership built on trust. I nearly laughed. Vanessa's mother spoke about the importance of commitment. Marcus caught my eye across the table, and I saw the same dark humor reflected there. After dessert, I stood up and tapped my glass. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "David and I have been married for 15 years, and Marcus and Vanessa for 14. That's a lot of years, a lot of memories, a lot of experiences." Polite laughter from the guests. "I wanted to take a moment to really honor these marriages," I continued. "To look back at where we've been and celebrate the truth of our relationships. So Marcus and I put together a little presentation. We hope you enjoy it." I nodded to Marcus, who was standing by the laptop connected to the large screen at the front of the room. David was smiling, completely unsuspecting. Vanessa looked mildly curious but relaxed. Marcus hit play. The room went dark except for the screen. Soft piano music started playing, Mad World, the haunting cover version, and then the photos began. The first image, David and Vanessa kissing in a parking lot. Gasps erupted from the audience. David's face went white. Vanessa's mouth dropped open. "Wait," David started to stand, but I put my hand on his shoulder and pushed him back down. "Sit," I said quietly. "Watch." The presentation continued, photo after photo. David and Vanessa at restaurants, checking into hotels, his hand on her waist, her head on his shoulder. Text message screenshots appeared between photos. "David, can't wait to see you tonight. Tell Marcus you're working late." "Vanessa, already did. I hate lying, but I can't stay away from you." "David, same. Rebecca suspects nothing. She's too busy with the kids." The room was completely silent except for the music and the occasional sob from someone in the audience. I saw David's mother with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa's father looked like he wanted to kill someone. Financial records appeared on screen, hotel charges, Tiffany receipt, restaurant bills, each one highlighted with dates and amounts. Then came the company policy violations. Screenshots of emails Vanessa had sent using her corporate account to arrange meetings with David. Records showing David had approved contractor payments to Vanessa's firm while personally involved with her, a clear conflict of interest. The video ended with a final message on the screen. 15 years of marriage, 6 months of lies. This is what betrayal looks like. The lights came back on. David was standing now, his face red, his hands shaking. "Rebecca, I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked calmly. "Explain the 6 months you've been sleeping with Vanessa. Explain the thousands of dollars of our money you spent on her. Explain the lies you told me every single day while I raised your children and took care of your home." "This is insane," Vanessa shouted, turning on Marcus. "You violated my privacy, you hacked my accounts. This is illegal." "Actually," Marcus said, his voice cold, "I used our shared family computer that you were careless enough to save your passwords on. Nothing illegal about that. But you know what is potentially illegal? Charging personal expenses to corporate accounts. Using company resources to facilitate an extramarital affair. Breach of ethics policies that could open both your companies to liability." David's boss, a stern woman named Patricia who'd been sitting 2 tables away, stood up. "David, I think you and I need to have a conversation on Monday morning." "And Vanessa," said a man I recognized as a senior partner at her firm, "so do we." "Wait," David looked around wildly. "Everyone, please, this is between Rebecca and me." "You made it public the moment you chose to betray her," David's own father said, his voice shaking with rage. "How could you do this? To Rebecca, to your children." "To all of us," my mother added, standing next to me and taking my hand. "We loved you, David. We trusted you." Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her face. "Marcus, please, we can talk about this at home." "There is no home," Marcus said. "I filed for divorce yesterday. The papers will be served on Monday. And copies of all this evidence have already been sent to your HR department and to the appropriate compliance officers at both companies." "You did what?" Vanessa shrieked. "What you forced us to do," I said, standing up. "David, I also filed for divorce. You'll be served Monday morning. I've frozen our joint accounts. I've documented every asset, every dollar you spent on your affair. My attorney has copies of everything shown here tonight." "Rebecca, please." David reached for me and I stepped back. "I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this." "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk," I said, and my voice was steady, strong. "A mistake is being late for dinner. What you did was a choice. 6 months of choices, hundreds of lies. You didn't make a mistake, David. You destroyed our marriage deliberately, day after day, and you were too cowardly to even be honest about it." "I want to hate both of you," Marcus said, looking at Vanessa and David. "But honestly, I just pity you. You threw away your families, your integrity, your reputations, for what? For hotel sex and stolen moments. Was it worth it?" The silence was deafening. People started leaving. David's colleagues avoided looking at him. Vanessa's friends walked past her without a word. Our families stayed, surrounding Marcus and me with support while David and Vanessa stood isolated in the center of the room, their affair exposed, their lies revealed, their futures destroyed. David tried one more time to talk to me, but my father stepped between us. "You don't get to speak to her," he said. "You lost that right. Leave now." David left. Vanessa left. And I stood there surrounded by people who loved me, and I finally let myself cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. The fallout was spectacular. David was fired 3 days later. His company's investigation revealed not only the affair, but also that he'd falsified expense reports and approved contracts to Vanessa's firm without disclosing their relationship. They threatened legal action to recover funds. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. The video from the party had been recorded by someone and spread through professional networks like wildfire. Vanessa was also terminated. Her firm faced potential legal liability because of her actions, and they cut ties immediately. She lost her clients, her professional credibility, everything. The divorce proceedings were brutal but straightforward. I had so much evidence that David couldn't fight me effectively. He tried to claim I'd entrapped him, that the party was entrapment, but my attorney shut that down quickly. "Your client's affair entrapped himself," Margaret told his lawyer. "My client simply documented it. I got primary custody of the kids, the house. a substantial portion of our assets. David got visitation rights and an enormous child support obligation he could barely afford after losing his job. Marcus's divorce was equally decisive. Vanessa tried to claim Marcus had violated her privacy, but the judge wasn't sympathetic when confronted with the evidence of her affair and financial misconduct. The kids were devastated, of course. That was the hardest part. Emma cried for weeks. Jake stopped talking to David entirely. I put them in therapy, and slowly they started to heal. "Did you have to embarrass Dad in front of everyone?" Emma asked me one night, 3 months after the party. "Yes," I told her honestly. "I did, because what he did wasn't just about me. It affected our whole family, our whole community. He made public choices that hurt public people, and he needed to face public consequences." "Was it worth it?" she asked. "The revenge?" I thought about that. It wasn't about revenge, sweetheart. It was about justice, about making sure he understood the weight of what he'd done, about protecting you and Jake financially, about showing you both that when someone betrays you, you don't have to accept it quietly. "I'm still mad at you," she said, "but I'm angrier at him." "That's fair," I said. 6 months after the party, I was sitting in a coffee shop when Marcus texted me. "Marcus, Vanessa moved across the country. Can't handle living in the same city where everyone knows." Me, good riddance. Marcus, David. Me, living in a studio apartment working retail, had to sell his car, can barely afford child support. Marcus, think they regret it. I thought about that. Did they regret it? Maybe, probably, but not for the right reasons. They regretted getting caught. They regretted the consequences. I doubted they regretted the affair itself, just that it had cost them so much. Me, I don't care if they regret it. I only care that they paid for it. Marcus, amen to that. A year after the party, I was thriving. I'd gone back to work full-time in marketing and quickly moved up to a director position. The kids were doing better, still wounded but healing. We'd moved to a smaller house that I bought with my own money, and I was building a new life. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious yet, but it was nice to remember that I was more than just someone's betrayed wife. I was Rebecca. I was smart, capable, funny, attractive. I deserved better than David had given me. I ran into David once at a grocery store. He looked terrible, older, thinner, exhausted. He tried to talk to me, but I simply walked past him. I had nothing to say to him. Marcus and I stayed in touch. Not romantically, neither of us was ready for that, and our connection was born from trauma, not attraction. But we became friends. Real friends. We'd meet for coffee once a month and talk about our kids, our lives, our healing. "Do you think we went too far?" he asked me once, on the anniversary of that infamous party. "No," I said without hesitation. "We gave them exactly what they deserved. They made their choices. We just made sure those choices had consequences. No regrets. None. And I meant it. Could I have handled it differently? Sure. I could have confronted David quietly, filed for divorce privately, let him keep his job and his dignity while I fell apart alone. But that would have made me the only victim. Instead, I made sure David and Vanessa faced the full weight of their choices. I made sure everyone knew what they'd done. I made sure their actions had real, lasting consequences. Some people called me vindictive, cruel, over the top. I called it justice. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Betrayal doesn't happen in a vacuum. When someone cheats, they're not just hurting their spouse. They're lying to their kids, stealing from their family, disrespecting their communities. And they usually get away with it because the betrayed spouse is too broken, too afraid, too ashamed to fight back. I refused to be that spouse. I refused to let David make me a victim. I refused to protect him from the consequences of his own choices. And in the end, I didn't just survive his betrayal. I exposed it, I fought it, and I won. Was it satisfying? Yes, deeply, completely satisfying. Was it enough? No, because the pain of betrayal doesn't disappear when you get revenge. It just becomes bearable. But bearable is better than broken. 2 years later, I was at Emma's soccer game when I got a text from an unknown number. "Rebecca, this is David. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know something. I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. Sorry for hurting you, for hurting our kids. You deserved better. You deserved honesty. You deserved faithfulness. I destroyed the best thing in my life, and I hate myself for it every single day. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. D." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted it without responding. Because I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret. I didn't need anything from him at all. I'd already taken back everything that mattered. My power, my dignity, my future. And I'd made sure he'd never forget this. Response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue the cost of betraying me. That's my story. The story of how I found out about my husband's affair, partnered with his mistress's husband, and orchestrated the most devastating public exposure either of them could have imagined. Some people will judge me for it. They'll say I should have been kinder, more forgiving, more private. Those people have never had their heart ripped out by someone who promised to cherish it forever. They've never lain awake at night wondering what they did wrong, how they could have been better, why they weren't enough. They've never felt the particular devastation of being betrayed by the person you trusted most in the world. And if they had, they might understand why I made the choices I did. I'm not proud of everything I did. The public humiliation was harsh. The calculated coldness of the plan was unlike me. But I'm not ashamed either, because David and Vanessa made their choices freely. They lied, they cheated, they stole time and money and trust from their families. They did it deliberately, repeatedly, without remorse. All I did was make sure they couldn't escape the consequences. All I did was refuse to be silent. All I did was fight back. And in the end, that saved me, not the revenge itself, but the act of refusing to be a passive victim. The decision to document, to plan, to execute. The choice to partner with Marcus and turn our shared pain into shared power. We didn't just expose our cheating spouses. We took back control of our own narratives, and that made all the difference. So if you're reading this, if you're going through something similar, if you're sitting in your car or your bathroom or your bed wondering how you'll survive this betrayal, know this. You are stronger than you think. You are worth more than they made you feel. And you have more power than they want you to realize. Don't let them write your story. Don't let them make you the only victim. Fight back. Document everything. Protect yourself and your kids. Find your allies. Make your plans. And when the time is right, make sure they understand exactly what they've lost. Not for revenge. Not for satisfaction, for justice, for yourself, for the person you'll become on the other side of this pain. That's what I did. And I'd do it again.